What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and if you are new here, make sure you smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you never miss a single update, because today we are diving deep into one of the biggest stories in all of hockey right now. Auston Matthews, his injury, what it meant for the Toronto Maple Leafs 2025-26 season, and frankly, what it could mean for the entire future of this franchise. Because this is not just an injury update. This is a turning point. A pivotal moment in Leafs history that is going to define the next decade of hockey in Toronto. And if you are a Maple Leafs fan, you need to hear every single word of this video, because there is a lot to unpack. Let's start right at the beginning, the night everything changed. March 12, 2026. Scotiabank Arena. The Leafs are hosting the Anaheim Ducks in what should have been a relatively straightforward game. Toronto was already having a brutal season, already fighting through the noise, already dealing with roster issues and inconsistency that had plagued them all year long. And then, in the second period, in the slot, everything stops. Auston Matthews attempted to sidestep a hit in the slot when Ducks defenseman Radko Gudas closed in, and the result was a brutal knee-on-knee collision. Matthews crumpled to the ice immediately and was helped off by a trainer and teammate Brandon Carlo, putting minimal weight on his left leg. The arena went dead quiet. You could feel it through the broadcast. Everyone watching knew instantly that this was bad. This was not a bumped shoulder or a tweaked wrist. This was serious. And the confirmation came 2 days later. The Toronto Maple Leafs confirmed that captain Auston Matthews would miss the remainder of the 2025-26 season because of a serious knee injury. A grade 3 tear of the medial collateral ligament along with a quad contusion in his left knee. Grade 3. For anyone who doesn't know what that means medically, a grade 3 MCL tear is a complete rupture of the ligament. It is the most severe classification. This is not a strain, not a partial tear. This is your ligament completely giving out. And combined with a quad contusion on the same leg, you are looking at a left knee that took an absolutely devastating amount of damage in a single play. Now let's talk about Radko Gudas, because we cannot have this conversation without addressing the hit itself. Gudas was assessed a major penalty for kneeing and a game misconduct at 15:47 of the second period. After reviewing the incident, the NHL Department of Player Safety suspended Gudas for 5 games. 5 games. 5 games for a hit that ended the season of the best player in the game, a multi-time 60-goal scorer, an Olympic gold medalist, and the captain of one of the most storied franchises in North American professional sports. The hockey world erupted. The 5-game suspension handed to multi-time offender Radko Gudas stirred up controversy around the entire NHL, with Matthews' agent and even Connor McDavid weighing in on the Department of Player Safety's latest controversial decision. When Connor McDavid, the other best player on the planet, is publicly commenting on how poorly player safety handled this situation, you know the league has a real problem on its hands. But here we are. The system did what it did, and Auston Matthews paid the price with his season. Now the next question the entire Leafs fan base needed answered was whether he would need surgery. And at first, the Maple Leafs and Matthews were hopeful he would not need surgery, though they acknowledged they would not know for a week or two. That slim window of hope disappeared quickly. Matthews underwent successful MCL knee repair surgery, with a recovery timetable of approximately 12 weeks following the procedure. 12 weeks. That takes him well into the summer of 2026. And just like that, the 2025-26 Toronto Maple Leafs season, for all intents and purposes, was over. Not just because they lost their captain and best player, but because this injury ripped the bandage off a wound that had been festering all year long. A season that simply was not working. Let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture of what this season actually was for Toronto, because context matters enormously here. The disastrous 2025-26 season saw the Leafs finish with the 5th worst record in the entire league. Let that sink in. One of the highest payroll teams in the NHL, a team built around arguably the greatest goal scorer of his generation, finished with the 5th worst record in the whole league. This was not a close miss. This was not a bubble team that ran out of luck. This was a catastrophic, historically bad season by the standards of what the Maple Leafs are supposed to be. And the Matthews injury, while deeply unfortunate, was in many ways a symptom of a much deeper organizational sickness rather than the sole cause of the collapse. The fallout was swift and significant. The disappointing campaign ultimately led to the dismissal of Brad Treliving in March 2026. Toronto quickly replaced him with John Chayka, while Matt Sundin joined the organization as senior executive advisor as part of the franchise's reset. Matt Sundin, the greatest Maple Leaf of all time, the man whose sweater hangs from the rafters at Scotiabank Arena, is now helping guide this franchise back to relevance. That is a massive cultural statement from ownership. They are not tinkering around the edges anymore. They are going back to the foundation, back to what it means to be a Toronto Maple Leaf, and they are rebuilding this thing from the ground up, around a player they are absolutely committed to keeping. And that brings us to the most important subplot of this entire story, Auston Matthews' future in Toronto. Because while he was sitting at home recovering from knee surgery, the hockey world was asking a question that no Leafs fan ever wanted to have to ask. Is Auston Matthews going to be a Maple Leaf long-term? Questions surrounding his long-term future in Toronto intensified after his end-of-season media availability, where Matthews gave non-committal answers about the organization. Non-committal from a guy who just had his season ended by a dirty hit, who watched his team finish near the bottom of the league, who has 2 years left on a contract and no extension signed. The silence was deafening, and the fan base panicked. Rightfully so, because losing Matthews would not just be a hockey loss. It would be a generational loss, the kind of franchise-altering departure that takes decades to recover from. But here is where the story starts to turn. Here is where the narrative shifts from despair to something that at least resembles hope. Chayka met with his captain personally over the summer and came away genuinely encouraged, saying, "What I saw was a happy captain, who's got a lot of pride in being the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, someone who wants to win in Toronto, which aligns with how we're thinking about it." A happy captain. Those 3 words matter more than any trade rumor, any contract speculation, any anonymous source. When the GM looks you in the eye and says his franchise player is happy and wants to win in that city, you listen to that. And Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic has since reported that all signs point to Matthews staying for the 2026-27 season, though a long-term commitment beyond the 2 years remaining on his contract remains unresolved. So he is staying. For now. But the clock is ticking, and everyone in Toronto knows it. So what is John Chayka actually doing to make sure that Matthews never has a reason to leave? Because saying a player is your centerpiece and actually building around him are 2 very different things. And from what we have seen this summer, Chayka is putting his money and his moves where his mouth is. After 2 disappointing years under Craig Berube, this offseason the Maple Leafs have completely reshaped the environment around their superstar. From the front office down to the training room, General Manager John Chayka has built an infrastructure designed to get the very best out of the captain. That means new coaching. That means roster changes. That means addressing the systemic issues that have held Matthews back from reaching his ultimate ceiling as a player and a leader. And then there is the move that genuinely changes everything going forward. The 2026 NHL Draft. Of all Chayka's moves, none alters the trajectory of this franchise and Auston Matthews' future quite like the arrival of Gavin McKenna. Selected first overall in the 2026 NHL entry draft, McKenna is nothing short of a revelation for the Maple Leafs. At just 18 years old, McKenna is a cerebral tactician and an elite offensive driver, coming off a historic 129-point WHL season and a Memorial Cup run with the Medicine Hat Tigers. 129 points in the WHL. This kid is generationally talented, and he is now a Toronto Maple Leaf. And what does that mean for Auston Matthews? It means the defensive game plan that every team has used against Toronto for years. Suffocate Matthews, take away his time and space, limit his line mates. That game plan just got exponentially harder to execute. For years, the defensive strategy against Toronto has been simple. Suffocate Matthews, and you shut down the Leafs. McKenna breaks that algorithm. When you have to account for an 18-year-old phenom on another line who can also go out.